How's it going, everybody? Welcome into the Skyline Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Jack Hartman, joined as always by my good friend, my co-host on the West Coast, Nick Normand. Nick, how you doing today, man?
Doing well, doing well. Happy holidays, Jack. Feels like we're in that season now. We're in that
Mm-hmm.
post Thanksgiving, post Black Friday, Advent coming down the stretch here where we're getting towards New Year's and Christmas and all that. And so I feel like stuff at work's going to happen where it's going to be cookie exchange and secret Santas and all that sort of stuff just to try and get stuff done like that before people actually have time off. But
Mm-hmm.
feels like we're getting in the season. Had a little Friendsgiving on Sunday and
Nice.
already had a Christmas tree set up at my mom's house and it was decked out for it. So it feels like it's here.
Yep,
But
for
doing
sure.
well, Jack. Super stoked. How are you doing out there in Pennsylvania, man?
Yeah, doing well. We had our first snow of the season this morning. We got about 4 inches. So that was nice. Getting to experience that again. Because I have not seen snow where I live in 2 years. So it was nice to see that. Not nice to shovel this morning, but you take the good with the bad. So yeah, no, so it's been good. But we had a very exciting. You and I were just talking about it. Really, really awesome slate of games this last weekend. Both the Thanksgiving Day and the Black Friday game. But then also on Sunday there were just some all around really, really solid games. So we'll just get right into it. Nick, who's a team that really impressed you this week?
I was really impressed by the Dallas Cowboys. I got to give them some flowers here. Like they've been on a dominant stretch here where the Raiders game that was in prime time, like people watched that and they were like, wow, the Cowboys look so good. Their defensive front looks amazing. And I think all of us as fans took that with a grain of salt, being like, well, it's against the Raiders. Their offensive line's terrible. They're a mess. Like they're falling apart. They have no energy or life. It's the Raiders. And then they proceeded to beat the Eagles and look really good there. Then proceeded to beat the Chiefs and they looked really good there. So I got to give a lot of credit to the Cowboys. They've been awesome. Dak's been playing incredible. I've been trying to pound that drum the last couple of months. And
For
I
sure.
think Dak, he's on track, I think, to be an all pro, potentially, definitely a pro bowler, I think. He
Hmm.
leads the league in yards per game outside of Jameis in this 2 game stretch where, like, Jameis is a bit of an outlier being him, and it's only been 2 games. But Dak basically leads in yards, and he's second in touchdowns here in the league as far as passers. And their wide receiver duo is obviously insane. CD and Pickens have looked ridiculous. CD's not even playing particularly well. Like he's had a bunch of drops, and he still wins easily against coverage as an elite route runner. And Pickens has obviously looked incredible, taking slants and taking them 30, 40, 50 yards. And also on the deep balls, being able to catch everything. His hands are obviously incredible. I have a bunch of stats here too about Dallas that I just think like makes me look at them through a different lens that they've looked throughout the season. Where right now, Dallas, I feel like we're looking at them as light show, passing the ball, amazing through the air attack. And obviously they are because CD and Pickens have been amazing. But also their rushing attack's been really, really good. They've been averaging 121 yards per game, and they only have one game under 100 yards rushing. That's ridiculous as far as the consistency of the ground game. You're going to be able to rely on the play action off of that. You're going to be able to grind out games late where they're able to throw it late on third downs against teams like the Chiefs or Eagles. But they're also being able to rush in those spots to be able to set up shorter third downs, which is super critical for trying to hit up third and mediums or third and shorts rather than third and longs. So they've been awesome there. Also, I think that these last 2 wins that they've gotten against the Kansas City team that's desperate and against the Philadelphia team that's really good in close games and really talented overall, especially when Philly had a 21-point league. I just think the grit and the ability to get those wins make them 2 of the most impressive wins, I think, all season. Maybe not the 2 most, but I think they're probably 2 of the 5 most impressive wins potentially. And I think the defense being turned around has just been awesome. Where pre Quinn and Williams trade, so pre trade deadline, and before they got many guys back, including Quinn and Williams that they got in the trade, they were allowing 420 yards per game on defense. That's ridiculously terrible and overall awful in all phases. Since Quinnen Williams got to Dallas, they've been averaging 314 yards per game allowed. 100 less yards per game allowed on defense is absurd. And to have it just flip like a switch is ridiculous. Dallas has looked really, really good. Obviously, they still allow a good number of points. Dak threw the interception at the start of the game on Thanksgiving, and that wasn't great. But besides that, I think they've looked incredible in all three phases of the game here in the last couple of weeks here.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, especially like you talked about how impressive these last two wins have been for them. These last two wins, they beat both of the teams that played in the Super Bowl in a span of 5 days last week. That is incredibly impressive. Now, I'm sure we're going to talk about the Eagles a little bit later, but and what that really means for them. But still, like, the Cowboys looked phenomenal. The defense has definitely looked a lot better. You mentioned Quinn and Williams addition, but also the Wilson, or sorry, not Peyton Wilson, Logan Wilson. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the Logan Wilson edition, and how important that has been because I think I mean we've had lots of knocks on the Cowboys defense for many years now, but the biggest one was they basically had DBs playing linebacker. Just that was just kind of how it was. Their linebackers were they sort of had this philosophy of having smaller, more athletic linebackers, but in reality, that's a safety. A smaller,
Mm-hmm.
more athletic linebacker is a safety, not a linebacker. So they were basically having safeties playing linebacker. So to get a real linebacker in there, really big. Also getting Overshown back, really big.
Mm-hmm.
And
Sure.
I still think that there's too big of a hill for this team to climb.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that said, I still think there's too big of a hill for this team to climb. But that said, they look really, really good. They look really
Mm-hmm.
good, and I think unfortunately, what for their sake, um, unlike with college football, where quality of wins might get you into the playoff over a team that has more wins than you do, in the NFL, it doesn't matter how good your wins are.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have enough of them, and there's a chance that they beat Detroit this Thursday,
Mm-hmm.
and that's three amazing wins in a row. That
Mm-hmm.
is like, okay, that's cool. Moves them up the board a little bit. But anyway, no, the Cowboys look very, very good. Team that I'm gonna go with is, and I've got two here that I'm struggling to decide between. But I'll go with one that also played earlier in the weekend, and that is the Chicago Bears. The thing that I said about the Chicago Bears a couple weeks ago, and I meant it a couple weeks ago, was they have lots of wins, but look at who their wins are against, right? A couple weeks ago, they had a lot of wins. They had 7 wins, and I think their strength of victory was like 310 or something. They've gone and won back-to-back games against teams with winning records, teams that are playoff caliber teams in Pittsburgh and then Philadelphia at Philadelphia on Black Friday, and they looked dominant in that game. They didn't just win that game, they destroyed that game. I mean, if you look at the box score here, they ran for 281 yards. 281 yards against the Eagles defense that we have been saying no matter what is happening with the weird stuff in the locker room on the offense, that defense is consistent. That defense gave up 281 rushing yards to the Chicago Bears in Kyle Monangai, DeAndre Swift, Caleb Williams, DJ Moore, and Luther Burden III, all having carries. I'm going to be honest. That is not a running back room that instills a lot of fear. And they just did it. They just did it. Caleb Williams did not have a great passing game. He completed less than 50% of his passes, only 150 yards and a pick. But when you're able to run the ball that well, who cares? Like that's, I mean, and I feel like I have to say that because I've said that so much about the Lions when it's like, oh well, Jared Goff's numbers aren't flashy. It's like, yeah, because they can give the ball to Jameer Gibbs and David Montgomery, and they can go and run the ball. So like, sure, he doesn't have to be flashy, So to be consistent, definitely need to say that, about Caleb Williams here. They also did a great job containing the Eagles on offense. The Eagles continue to struggle running the football. They only had 87 rush yards for the whole game. Jalen Hurts, 19 of 34 for 230, two touchdowns and a pick. Not great. AJ Brown, had a game where he went off 10 receptions for 132 yards and two touchdowns, but they lost. So like, what does it matter? The Bears they've looked really good the last 2 weeks. They looked really good this last week. They're playing Green Bay on Sunday afternoon, 4:25 game. Winner of that has the lead in the division, and likely the lead for the number one seed, depending on what the Rams do this weekend. Um, but yeah, I mean this is a Bears team that is actually for the first time. Probably for the first time since like Jay Cutler and Greg Olson and Matt Forte, is like genuinely a formidable foe, not
Mhm.
just in the NFC North, but in the NFC in general.
Mhm. Definitely. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that the metrics that you're looking at this through, as far as the lens, completely correct. Because 281 yards, that's obviously a ridiculous amount. That's a college football number that you'll see a blue blood run over an FBS school and you'll see that kind of score. But the other thing was that it wasn't like Swift ripped off a 70-yard carry or Monungai ripped off a 90-yard carry or anything like that. It was just 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 yards a carry. And that's the most demoralizing thing if you're a defense. If you're
Hmm.
a defense and you're lining up and you basically say, we know they're going to run, they know they're going to run, and you can't stop them and they're ripping off that long of carries. If you can just chug down the field like that, even if you're kicking field goals every time and not getting touchdowns, if your defense can't get a stop, I don't understand how you get out of that as a defense. Like if you're not able to set the tone of physicality and get stops against the run, it's just really hard to do anything out of that. And the other thing is, once you start doing that as an offense and you start ripping off carries like that, it opens up the play action where it's just easy off of that because they're going to
Hmm.
be selling out to stop that run. And then you're going to have Cole Kmet over the middle. You're going to have DJ Moore wide open on an in breaking route. Like it just opens up so much stuff off of the run when you're able to do that, where like if you're a team that gets a long 80 90-yard run, it's like, wow, that's awesome, you scored a touchdown. But the defense might be thinking that's an aberration, that was just blocked up perfectly and we were in the wrong defense. But if you're forced to sell out and stop it and can't, it opens you up to having issues all over the place on defense. And Chicago was able to take full advantage of that and not even have an incredible total offensive day with Caleb Williams. But they were able to just shred them on the ground, like you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the numbers, Kyle Monungai, 22 carries, 131 yards. His longest rush
Mm-hmm.
was 31 yards. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so
Yep.
that's 21 carries for 99 yards. That's still about 5 yards a carry. DeAndre
Yep.
Swift, 18 carries for 125 yards. His long was 23. That becomes
Mm-hmm.
17 carries for 102 yards. Again,
Mm-hmm.
that is more than 5 yards per carry, right? So
Mm-hmm.
like you said, it's not like, yeah, he had 22 carries for 130 yards and he had 55 of them on one carry. Like,
Right.
I mean, and both of those are explosive plays, considering their rushes for
Mm-hmm.
over 20 yards. But still, like I mean, they just pounded it down the Eagles' throats. Like the Eagles just literally couldn't do anything to stop it. So Chicago looked really good. Um, I think we all knew that Ben Johnson was going to be a great hire no matter where he went. But
Mm-hmm.
what he is unlocked in Chicago is very impressive. I think what we're seeing out of Chicago now, and the reason people are like poo-pooing on what they're doing a little bit is similar to what we saw in Dan Campbell's third year with the Lions when they went 12-5 and won the NFC North. Everyone's like, "Oh, well, look at who they're playing." And it's like, sure, but you can only play against, especially for a new coach that's come in like Ben Johnson. It's like, listen, I have an easy schedule because the last guy sucked. Well, guess what? You fired the last guy. It was that bad. Okay, so
Mm,
like I'm building from nothing, right? I'm starting with nothing. So I think it's very impressive. I think
mhm.
it's actually really interesting though. Chicago right now is the number one seed in the NFC. Between the one seed and the nine seed in the NFC right now, all of them have not all of them have 9 wins.
7 wins, I would think.
The Tampa Bay has 7 wins. Green Bay has 8 wins, but the
Mm,
7 seed has 9 wins. Right? There are 9 wins, between 9 and 8 wins all the way through there, except for the
mhm,
outlier of Tampa Bay. Um,
mhm,
so what's crazy, the betting odds right now, Chicago's the number one seed, and they also have the highest probability of not making the playoffs with 5 weeks to go of all of those teams that are currently in the NFC playoff picture. Um, but that like we were talking about, it's the competition's about to step up, right? It has stepped up. They've answered the call both times. They're going to Lambeau this week. Their four of their last five games are Green Bay, San Francisco on the road, and then hosting the Lions the last week of the season.
mhm,
So we're going to learn a lot about. I feel like we already have learned a lot about this team. I think we're going to learn a lot more, especially like, let's say they win two of those four games, and then the other one is against a Cleveland Browns team that is in complete disarray. That gets them to 12 wins. That probably locks up the NFC North. Um, the only way that it wouldn't would be if one of their losses is to Detroit and Detroit wins out. That would be the only way that it would not end for them
mhm,
with the NFC North championship.
mhm,
Um, Also, Green Bay is still above them, and if they lose two games to Green Bay, so like there are still ways, right? They haven't completely locked it up, but still, they
mhm,
they control their own destiny. They're winning games at the right time, and this could be a team that could be pretty competitive in the NFC playoff picture.
mhm. Definitely. Couldn't agree with you more there, Jack. And as you were saying, down the stretch here, having three NFC North games and against really good teams with two Packers games and one Lions game. And right now, they're actually 1-2 in the division, where they lost to the Vikings already and they lost to the Lions once badly when they got 50 points racked up on them. But man, I think if they're able to sweep the division down the stretch here, we're gonna have to look at them through a completely different lens. But I think those division games, we're gonna see what the Bears are actually made of here. Because I think right now us as fans are still tentative about how much do we actually believe about the Chicago team,
For
where
sure.
it seems like they're more of a ground and pound team, and their defense doesn't seem incredible, but it seems opportunistic, getting takeaways. But if they're able to actually turn that into really good offense, if they're able to rush for massive numbers against the Packers defense or against a physical Lions defense, or you're going to be able to get a Caleb Williams game against one of these really good teams, then I'm going to feel differently about it. But right now, against a good team in the Eagles, they dominated on the ground, and I give them a ton of respect for that. And you obviously do too. But playing a full and complete game where the defense and passing game and running game all looks impressive, I'm really curious what that looks like if we get that version of the Bears this year. Then I think they're on a whole different trajectory now already with Ben Johnson in his first year.
Yeah, and this is sort of put the bow on the Bears talk. But you look at some of their wins this year, and they've got some very concerning wins, right? They beat the Raiders 25-24. They beat the Commanders 25-24. They barely outlast the Bengals 47-42 at the beginning of November. That was Joe Flacco Bengals team. And that one, I mean, they pulled it out of their you know what at the very end
Mhm.
to come away with that one. They barely outlast the Giants 24-20. That was a game that was the nail in the coffin for Brian Daboll,
Mhm.
with the Giants. They beat the
Mhm.
Vikings 19-17, right? They outlast the Steelers at home 31-28. But
Mhm.
one thing that I think is probably a philosophy in that locker room, because I know it's a philosophy in the Lions locker room, is that it is hard to win games in the National Football League. It is.
Mhm.
And wins, especially again, comparing college to the NFL, where it doesn't matter how pretty it looks, wins matter, right? And
Mhm.
you need to learn, especially a new team or a team with a brand new head coach with no head coaching experience, a young team, you need to be able to learn how to win in the NFL. And if anything, those wins like that, now combined with these wins the last couple weeks against the Eagles, against the Steelers, we'll see what happens in these last 5 games for them. That those barely squeaking out wins earlier actually make me feel a little bit more confident that when the
Mhm.
going gets tough, they can find a way to scrap together a win instead of falling over to whatever the circumstances are.
Mhm.
And so I think the Bears are a team that are gonna scare some people and are gonna shock some people in the playoffs when we get there. Assuming that they don't have some sort of un completely unexpected collapse here in the last 5 weeks.
Mhm. For sure. For sure. Yeah.
All right, Nick, what's a team that you were concerned about after this last week?
I am very concerned, and I don't know whether to take this as a good or a bad thing as a Steelers fan about the Ravens. The Ravens and Lamar Jackson, since he's returned, have obviously looked bad. They've won more games, but their offense has looked dreadful. Lamar
Mm-hmm.
Jackson in the last 4 games has 1 total touchdown, and that's against 3 interceptions and 4 fumbles. Of those 4 fumbles, 2 were lost, but he still fumbled 4 times, and they've been bad fumbles. So a 1 to 5 turnover touchdown to turnover ratio. And man, it's not even like they're playing good teams lately here, and their offense with Lamar Jackson hasn't looked good. They've played some weak teams here where what their wins have been this season. I have them all listed here. The Ravens have one good win when they beat the Bears, and Tyler Huntley was the starting quarterback for that win against the Bears. They beat the Bears
Mm-hmm.
30-16. Good win by the Ravens. Besides that game, they beat Tua. They beat Joe Flacco when he was on the Browns. So that's Joe Flacco without the good receiving weapons the Bengals have. They beat Dylan Gabriel, they beat Tyrod Taylor, and then they beat Nine and the Vikings. Those just are not good quarterbacks who are playing for teams that are falling apart. The teams that the Ravens have beaten are a combined 27-45. That is a 37.5 point percentage as far as win percentage by those teams. And that includes a Bears team that's 9-3. If you
Mm-hmm.
take out that 9-3 Bears team, they're even worse than 30% win percentage. That's how bad the teams are that we're talking about that the Ravens are beating. And this Ravens team that Lamar Jackson and the offense has looked incredible the last couple of years. This year just has not been good. Derrick Henry last year, after having a resurgence, last year he had one singular game with 65 or fewer yards. This season, he has 6 games with fewer than 65 yards rushing. That's ridiculous considering that we're not even done with the season yet. Last year, Derrick Henry had 42 broken tackles. That's a ridiculous number. 42 broken tackles last year. This year, 7. Not even in the double digits for broken tackles as a running back. And a running back as good as Derrick Henry, who's had a couple of big games this year. I just think that this Ravens team, although the defense has started to look like they're turning it around, because they looked terrible at the start of the season when Josh Allen and the Bills came back on them, when they weren't able to stop anybody when Lamar Jackson was out and just getting torn apart. This Ravens defense has looked better. They still have injury issues and people out. They've looked better. But the thing is, a better defense for this team when their defense was terrible, when now their offense is looking awful, it's just always something with the Ravens team that's 6-6 and still has a really good chance to make the playoffs and win their division. But that's not really an indictment on how good they are. It's an indictment on how bad the division is, and the Steelers not able to win some of these close games against a Bears team that they only beat the Steelers by 3. When the
Mm-hmm.
Steelers lost the Bengals in prime time back a month and a half ago. Like the fact that the Ravens are still in this, I don't feel confident about them as a team. I feel terrible about them as a team right now, especially considering they're allowing Lamar Jackson to play what looks like quite injured and not 100% or close to it as far as his mobility. I'm concerned about the Ravens and what they're going to look like down the stretch here. And for Lamar Jackson's health, in all honesty, I like a healthy Lamar Jackson who's able to be dynamic and watch his highlights and be an incredible top four quarterback in the league basically every season. And he's had injury issues over the years. And right now we're seeing the most diminished version of Lamar Jackson we've ever seen.
Yeah, no, the situation with the Ravens is very concerning. You mentioned some of those wins that they've had lately. They beat the Jets 23-10 at home. That's not the type of score you're looking to see of that game. They beat the Browns with Dylan Gabriel 23-16. They beat the Vikings 27-19. Like, those are not those I mean, they're wins, and at the time that they started that streak, they were um well, okay, let me put it this way. Going back to the Ravens, the win against the Bears and the win against the Dolphins, they were 1-5 before before those games, and they won five straight, but it's not like their wins have started here and have gone up like this. Their wins started here and now they've come down like this, and they've reached probably, to me, the lowest point in their season is this loss to the Bengals 32-14. I know they lost to the Texans 44-10 at home much earlier in the regular season, but the this like, to only score 14 points against this Bengals defense is really really bad. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm concerned about the Ravens. I think it is not. I won't even make this one of my predictions because I think it's too obvious. Who the AFC North will not win a playoff game this year. Like, it doesn't matter
Yeah.
if it's the Ravens or if it's the Steelers, or even if somehow, because the Ravens and Steelers look so abysmal right now, the Bengals find a way. Like, there's no
Uh,
way that the AFC North winner is winning a playoff game, even though they're going to be playing the likes of the Chargers, who don't have offensive linemen, the Colts, who have Daniel Jones, or the Bills, who look very beatable, basically every week right now. Um, it won't matter. Whoever is going to Baltimore or to Pittsburgh is going to leave victorious.
And I do feel I want to point out too that there were some really timely turnovers in that game where like likely fumbling through the end zone when he had an easy walk-in touchdown. The Lamar Jackson turnover at his own goal line that didn't even turn into points because the Bengals went for it on fourth down and then didn't get it. Like there were timely plays that the Bengals defense made that I give credit to the Bengals defense. Good on them when they're not a good defense. And
Mm,
playing, I think, still without Hendricks and a couple of other players impressive by them. But very timely turnovers did change the shape of this game, but still losing by three scores, I think it was, to a Bengals team that looked lifeless at points in that season this season against the defense that's been dreadful for the better part of 3 years,
mhm.
against a team that Joe Burrow's coming back off of injury and having to take his shoe off his foot between drives because he's still not 100%, a team without T. Higgins. Like, this isn't a Bengals team that's like the Bengals team that went to back-to-back AFC championships. This is a
Right.
Bengals team that basically has nearly nothing to play for. They're a 2% chance to make the playoffs, and you lost to them badly. Like, that's just bad stuff right there. That's just bad football by that Ravens team.
For sure. For sure. All right, team that I am concerned about, that disappointed me this week, and I'm uneasy about their ability to have continued success. That is the Indianapolis Colts. The Indianapolis Colts played Houston this last week. They played them at home, and they lost 20-16. Now, this is what's sort of been happening with the Colts lately. Their trajectory has been rough. Looking at their last four games, they lose at Pittsburgh by a touchdown. They beat the Falcons in Berlin in overtime. They lose to the Chiefs by a field goal in overtime, and now they lose to the Texans here. Um, the two losses of Pittsburgh and Kansas City uh, typically would hold weight as like, well, close losses to good teams. I don't think this season they do. Um, Especially if we want to look at the Colts as a team that is, like no, they're competitive. They're going to make some noise in the AFC playoff picture. Well, Indianapolis, you lost to Pittsburgh by a touchdown on the road, and Buffalo just went and smacked Pittsburgh by 19 points on the road, or at Pittsburgh, right? So if you want to play the comparison game like that of how you stack up against the rest of the AFC, it's not good. Um, and so this not only does this win or for the Texans and loss for the Colts put Jacksonville back atop the AFC South, it also means that Houston is now only a game back of the AFC South. And the if we look at the playoff the AFC playoff picture right now, Indianapolis is 6. Okay, they're all three wild card teams are at 8-4. Houston is right behind them at 7-5. Houston is getting hot at the right time. Houston has a much easier remaining schedule, including a game against Indianapolis to end the season. I think there's a chance that Indianapolis may miss the playoffs. Their remaining schedule, they go to Jacksonville. They No matter how
Mhm.
good they are and how bad Jacksonville is, Indianapolis finds a way to not look good when they play Jacksonville at Jacksonville. It's
Mhm.
just kind of how it goes. It's weird, but it just has been the case in recent history. They go to
Mhm.
Seattle, they host the Niners, they host the Jaguars, and they go to Houston, like I mentioned. If we look at what Houston has remaining, Houston uh, goes to the Chiefs this week. They host the Cardinals, host the Raiders, go to the Chargers, host the Colts.
Mhm.
I like the Texans' remaining schedule over the Colts. Looking at Jacksonville's last remaining games, hosting the Colts, hosting the Jets, going to the Broncos, going to the Colts, hosting the Titans. I'd rather have that schedule. Let's look at Buffalo too, another team there that's in the mix. Hosting the Bengals, going to New England, going to Cleveland, hosting the Jets, and hosting the Eagles. Again, I see more wins on that schedule, and the Chargers are the last team there that are sort of in the mix. Hosting the Eagles, going to Kansas City, going to Dallas, hosting the Texans, going to the Broncos. I think of the 5 team schedules that we just looked at, I think the
Mhm.
Chargers and the Colts are the most challenging. And I
Mhm.
think if we're looking, the good thing is for, in my opinion, the good thing for the Chargers is that there are 4 spots for those 5 teams, not 3 spots for those 5 teams. And
Mhm.
I think the Colts might be the team that's left out,
Mhm.
especially with
Mhm.
that, not even, bringing into account like, okay, well, hey, Kansas City always seems to find a way. Maybe they get hot and they sneak up in there. It's hard to imagine with 5 games left and being 2 games back of the wild card spot, but they play a couple of these wild card teams or they play a couple of these teams ahead of them. They might be able to do it, right? Like, I think there's a chance that the Colts go from they were, the number 1 seed 10 weeks into the season to potentially
Mhm.
certainly losing the division and potentially not even making the playoffs. Um,
Mhm.
this last week was a game that it was, we sort of looking at their last few games, that loss to the Chiefs, in overtime on the road, that was a quality loss, right? That was like, hey, you know what? The Chiefs had their backs against the wall. They had to win this one if they wanted to, keep hope alive. It's not surprising that they won it, and you took them to overtime and only lost by a field goal. You know what? Hey, that's a good loss. That's a quality loss if
Mhm.
you go and you beat the Texans at home the next week to continue to like establish like we're still the best team in this division. And you didn't. And then the Chiefs went and lost to the Cowboys on Thanksgiving, which made that loss not look so great. Um, that's not we haven't even started looking at the at the stats of the game yet. In this game, Jonathan Taylor only had 85 rushing yards. He had 36 receiving yards. So that's about a buck 20. No touchdowns. Daniel Jones, 14 of 27 for 201 yards. He threw 2 touchdowns and no picks, but that's not a very efficient day. Completing passes. The Texans defense, the Texans offense, excuse me, also played a game that was like, you can beat this team, right? Like CJ Stroud was 22 of 35 for 276 yards, but no touchdowns and a pick. They, as a team, only ran for 108 yards. Like, those are very beatable numbers. And Indianapolis just couldn't do it. So I'm concerned about this Colts team. I'm concerned that they're not going to make the playoffs. I think if I had to, you know, make a choice right now, will the Colts make the playoffs or not? Like, all stakes on the line. I think I'd bet not.
Mhm. Yeah, you bring up so many good points there, Jack. I think that one other point that you kind of softly touched on was that Kansas City loss that the Colts had. That Kansas City right now, one of the big stories with them, obviously, they've lost a bunch of games. They're 6-6. But one of the critical things with them was the tiebreakers. They don't have the tiebreaker against the Bills. They don't have the tiebreaker against the Jags. They've already lost once to the Chargers. They don't have a good record in conference. But what they do have, they have a tiebreaker over the Ravens, but that doesn't matter because the AFC North is about winning that rather than a wild card spot.
Right.
But the thing is, by the Colts losing and losing that top spot in their division, that opens up the door for the Chiefs to chase down the Colts. And they do have the tiebreaker over the Colts. And so when we're talking about, oh, the Chiefs have to go perfect down the stretch here, have to hit up 11 wins, they have a shot here where they could actually only need to get 10 wins. And if the Colts only win 10 games, that opens up the door for Kansas City because they have that tiebreaker. When
Right.
before everybody's thinking, oh no, the Chiefs need to get 11 wins minimum because they don't have the tiebreakers. This tiebreaker, I think, is something that opens the door for Kansas City to sneak in when they didn't have that chance with the way things were looking before this.
Well, and here's the other weird thing that puts the Colts in like a really big lose-lose situation.
Hmm.
This week the Texans play the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football.
Mm-hmm.
If the Texans win, I think that's the nail in the coffin for the Chiefs. Because then at best, the Chiefs the Chiefs at best can get to 10 wins, right? Um that said, um like or sorry, 11 wins. At best then the Chiefs can get to 11 wins.
Mm-mm,
Um
10. They have 6 losses. They'd be at 7 if they lost that game. They're 6-6.
Oh, right. My bad, my bad. Right. So the best that the Chiefs can do is get to 10 wins.
Mm-hmm.
That said, then the Texans just got another win, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
Texans are also chasing you down. Now, on
Mm-hmm.
the other hand, okay, you want to stave off the Texans, you want the Chiefs to win. But if you get into a tie-breaking situation between the Chiefs and the Colts, the Chiefs have the head-to-head, right? So like you're in a really really bad place if you're Indianapolis because of these two losses back to back. If you'd beaten one of them, then you can at least root for the team that you beat in this game on Sunday. Instead,
Mm-hmm.
you lost to both, and either way, you're in a bad spot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's tough sledding for Indianapolis. They need to figure some stuff out. They need to turn some stuff around, and they might even like turn stuff around with how hard of a remaining schedule they have is not good. Right now, the only game that they're going to play that is not against a current playoff team is playing the Texans again, the final week of the season. And at that point, the Texans might be one of those playoff teams.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. Well, let's briefly talk some NFL head coaching hot seat. It's we've had only one coach fired thus far, in Brian Dayball. Um,
Two. Two. Titans head coach, Callahan,
oh, right. Yes. Okay.
early in the
Two head
season.
coaches fired so far. It seems like because of how many guys a lot of the teams that are bad this year, they just made a coaching change last offseason. So it
Mhm.
seems like we're not really going to have many guys on the hot seat, but still, there are some interesting storylines and some interesting things to talk about. We won't bury the lead on this one. Mike Tomlin was booed out of Acrisure Stadium this Sunday. Um, I feel like, and I'll say this and then open the floor to you, Nick, as our resident Steelers fan. I feel
Mhm.
like the thing that will probably end up happening is eventually Mike Tomlin and his representatives will go to Pittsburgh and be like, listen, we think it's probably best for both of us if we move on. And at that point, Pittsburgh will sort of breathe a sigh of relief and be like, okay, yeah, we think so too. And then it'll be, we mutually agreed to part ways.
Mhm.
And then Mike Tomlin will go get a job somewhere else and be quite successful, a la Andy Reid. And it'll be hard because you'll have then people who'd be like, man, imagine if the Steelers held on to him. But also, it feels like, and this is me from the total outside looking in, without
Mhm.
having skin in the game on either side, it just
Mhm.
feels like it's time. Like they had a good run. Um, it won't be a messy, breakup. Like there's respect there both ways.
Mhm.
But that just feels like something that needs slash is going to happen. I'm not saying necessarily that's going to happen this off season, but I also wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't happen this off, or I wouldn't be surprised if it does happen this off season either. That's sort of where I'm at on the on Mike Tomlin right now. I guess if we were to do a scale, and we can do that with all of these guys, like 1 to 10, how hot is the seat? I think Mike Tomlin's seat is always going to be cool, um, but someday he'll decide, like, hey, it might be time, and the Steelers will find themselves in a place where they can go like, yeah, yeah, we think so too.
Mhm.
So.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree with you there, Jack, that the Steelers, it feels like that end of that Andy Reid tenure when he was in Philadelphia, that even though Philadelphia knew Andy Reid was a great coach, he won a whole bunch of games. He made 5 NFC championship games. He was a really good coach. The offense was always good with them. They had one bad season that was terrible in that 2012 season, and then they fired him. Tomlin, his teams have just never been bad enough where obviously he has the record for never having a losing season and having it worse than 8-8 season. But man, it just the pressure the last 2 or 3 years, I would say, as a Steelers fan, has been come on, win a playoff game. Come on, just win a playoff game. And the Steelers standard, it's always one of those things talked about in Pittsburgh. The standard is the standard of we're trying to win the Super Bowl every year. And at this point, the standard's fallen to just win a playoff game. Come on, just win a playoff game.
Mm,
We draft Kenny Pickett because we want to have our quarterback of the future to win a playoff game. We bring in Russell Wilson because we want to win a playoff game. We bring in Aaron Rodgers because we just want to win a playoff game.
mm-hmm.
And right now, I think that the main separator of this team compared to the Steelers teams of the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, this Steelers team doesn't have a great offense. Obviously, that's normal for all these Steelers teams. Aaron Rodgers obviously has played pretty well as far as Steelers quarterback standards, but the defense hasn't been the transcendent defense that it's been able to be the last couple years because guys like Cam Hayward are obviously very old. He's 35, 36 years old. TJ Watt is no longer prime TJ Watt. He's still a great defensive player and able to rack up 10 sack seasons, I think, at this point. But he's not lead the league in sacks, best defensive
Mm-hmm.
player on the planet type of player. Minka Fitzpatrick, obviously gone. He was an incredible safety for the Steelers. Jalen Ramsey's came in and been good. But the thing is, if you have a team with a number of good players and some bad players, that's different than a team with some bad players, some good players, and some great players. The Steelers simply don't really have any great players on this roster. And when you don't have great players, it's hard to produce great plays. These game changing plays of interception, forced fumble, touchdown on defense, long catch by somebody like a Pickens that Metcalf is able to do sometimes. Like they just don't have those players really outside of a TJ Watt rarely, like in the Bears game.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that about time for Mike Tomlin and the Steelers, man. I just think that right now, if you're the Steelers and if you're Tomlin, Tomlin's talked about for a number of years kind of how he views himself in terms of like he wouldn't want to take a college job. Obviously, he'd have teams lined up, I think, to hire him as a head coach, even at this point with what his resume is now. When I think the view of Tomlin is at potentially an all time low of him as a head coach since he became the Steelers head coach. Just because right now I think he's kind of synonymous with mediocrity and just kind of getting by. And I think that his ability to be a floor raiser is still an elite level. I think he can take bad teams and raise their floor incredibly well. But I think it's about time. If I'm the Steelers, I think I try and trade him, try and find a landing spot for him that he's able to settle into. A team like the Giants, I think, that need a culture setter, that their floor's
Mm-hmm.
been so low for a decade, that Mike Tomlin, I think, I don't know that the Jackson Dart Tomlin marriage would make sense because I think Jackson Dart's not necessarily a Tomlin guy. Maybe he could be, but I think a team like that, I think maybe a team like Miami and the Dolphins, if they fire their head coach, which seems potential, if the Browns fire their head coach, that seems like that could happen. I think there are a number of teams that having an adult in the room and a floor raiser like Tomlin could be great for them. And I think if you're the Steelers trying to find a trade where you're able to get some draft compensation, where you're able to move on into the future and potentially find another coach to become the next dude. The Steelers haven't had to fire a coach ever in their entire existence since 1969 or 70 when they hired Chuck Noll. And so it's obviously been over 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's time for Tomlin, man. He's been around with the Steelers since 2007. And it just feels like this chapter is kind of closed and that Tomlin, it doesn't seem like necessarily wants it like he used to anymore. And it doesn't seem like the Steelers want Tomlin like that much anymore. So I think it's about time for him to move on and find somewhere else that he could be beloved somewhere else, I think.
For sure. Another guy you just mentioned, actually, Mike McDaniel, head coach of the
Mhm.
Dolphins, after they lost to the Ravens on Sunday Night Football 28-6, ownership came out and said he's staying
Mhm.
for the rest of the year. They affirmed he's going to be there for the rest of the year. Since then, the Dolphins have not lost a game. A lot of people are talking like he's coaching himself out of the hot seat. Here's where I think, and I'm not the decision maker for the Dolphins, so there's a chance that in their mind he is coaching the Dolphins or he's coaching his way out of the hot seat. I don't think he should be considered that way though. He has the win over the Bills 30-13. That was shocking and a very very good win. That said, I think we look at that now and think that says more about the Bills than about him and about the Dolphins. Since then, an overtime field goal win against the Commanders, and a
Mhm.
21-17 win against the Saints.
Mhm.
We've said literally earlier, when talking about the Bears, that wins are hard to come by in this league.
Mhm.
However, those are not inspiring wins that make you think this guy is the guy. Not to me, at least. Now, I think you could absolutely make the argument, and I think I would make the argument that you look at this Dolphins roster right now, and you're like, who does he have to work with? Like, we know what Tua is.
Mhm.
Like we just we know what he is at this point. Devon Achan is a pretty good running back, but the receivers, it's like Tyreek Hill has fallen off a cliff. He's not even playing right now. He's hurt.
Mhm.
Jalen
Waddle's
Waddle
good.
is good, but like he can only be as good as the quarterback that's able to get him the ball. There's nothing, really there on the offensive line. The bright spot on the defense was Jalen Phillips. You traded him to Philadelphia. Like it's just like what is there to be inspired by? Um,
Mhm.
and so I feel like even though some people might be looking at it as McDaniel's coaching his way, off the hot seat, I think the Dolphins would be wise to fire him. I think they've already moved on from their GM this year. So fire McDaniel in the offseason and start over. Hire a new GM, hire a new head coach, get, give them a runway, give them, make it very clear that they have time to, clear out whatever is left over from the old regime, get what they want in there and get what they want involved, you know, give them a chance to try and clean up the horrendous cap situation that you've been put in, and see what you can do. So I think it's important. I felt it important to bring him up because again, some people are talking like he's coached his way off the hot seat, and it's like if that's the case, then the Dolphins are just setting themselves even farther back.
Mhm. I would say that he's probably coached him off the hot seat as far as being fired in season, but I think that it feels like the end of this season is kind of the end of the road. Like I think some of the stories have just been kind of damning for Mike McDaniels, where there are some stories you hear about some of these coaches that stick. I remember, I believe, this offseason during training camp, there was the report of like them practicing with the Lions, I think. And they practiced with the Lions, and you heard like complaints come out of the Dolphins players being like, the Lions practice too physical. And I think that that's kind of stuck to McDaniels, of McDaniels being like seen as this not tough guy, seen as a guy who's not disciplined enough with his players, who's not able to instill the level of physicality, to have dudes missing meetings, to have guys who it doesn't seem like you can control. Guys like Tyreek Hill or losing a Jalen Ramsey, where it seemed like that was wrapped up there and that's why he had to leave. It just seems like right now that even though the heights of what McDaniels are as a play caller, as an offensive designer, as a schemer, and ability to make two of the best version of him is really good, I think his ability to be a head coach and manage a football team, instill that physicality, that leadership, that ability to make your team what they need to be their best,
Mm-hmm.
isn't there in all facets. Where I think he's an elite coordinator of offense, and I think he's a coach that anybody will want to have on their staff. And I think that realistically, he kind of fits the image of what Miami should be as far as an offensively slanted team that's explosive and pass happy. But I think that it's kind of just run its course, and the press has been bad enough and the team's kind of deteriorated and devolved into a team that doesn't have enough talent or enough direction to dig themselves out of this hole. So I think that he's probably around the middle of the hot seat, around maybe a 5. But I think that this season is probably the last season of Mike McDaniels here down the stretch, especially with the new GM coming in wanting to install his own guy.
For sure. Yeah, I think it would just be poor to, poor decision making to hold on to him.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's something that we were talking about last year around this time as well, and they did hold on to him. So, we'll see. They are in a really bad cap situation, so maybe to them holding on to him saves a few bucks,
Mm-hmm.
which would be true, but would be pretty bad if
Mm-hmm.
if that's the situation they're in. All right, a couple
Yeah.
more here real quick. Kevin Stefanski. Kevin Stefanski and the Cleveland Browns are 3-9 right now.
Mm-hmm.
The way I see it, maybe at best they end up at 5-12. They play the Titans this week. They also play the Steelers and the Bengals back to back the last 2 weeks of the season. There's a chance that they win one of those,
Mm-hmm.
but again, we're talking best case scenario there, for them.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that Kevin Stefanski has as his argument, and I think it is a very, very valid one, is he can say, when have you ever given me a quarterback? You gave me
Mm-hmm.
Baker Mayfield. I got to the playoffs and won a playoff game with Baker Mayfield. You thought he wasn't good enough. You moved on from him. Since then, what have I had? I had success. I got a team to the playoffs that had four different starters that year, and Joe Flacco was the most successful. I got that team to the
Mm-hmm.
playoffs. Okay? So, why don't you actually go and give me a quarterback? The defenses that I have had, thank you, Jim Schwartz, have always been amazing. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, why don't you actually get me a quarterback and let's see how this goes?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I don't love Shador. He's had a little success, but people are hyping up his success more than it actually is. We're going to
Mm-hmm.
have two first round draft picks next year. One of them is going to be very high. Let's either make a move or see which quarterback is there for us when it comes to us. Let's actually draft him, actually give me a chance to develop him, actually
Mhm.
get me receivers that can catch the ball and
Mhm.
give me a chance to actually do this thing because I have one of the best defenses in the NFL. You just keep taking the wind out of my sails when it comes to having a quarterback and being able to do stuff on offense.
Mhm.
If Kevin Stefanski were to say that to ownership and the front office, I don't know how you can disagree with him, right? That he's a multiple time coach of the year,
Mhm.
but that said, the results are not there, so it's tough.
Mhm. I think it's really hard to. I think that it's so clear that Kevin Stefanski is the best coach the Browns have had of the last 30 years or 25 years since they got reincarnated into this version of the Browns. It's completely clear. He's the best by far. He's the only one that's won a playoff game for them. He's made the
Hmm.
playoffs twice for them. He is the best manager and has had the best era of the Cleveland Browns, of this version of the Cleveland Browns, sum total. And I think that it would be mismanagement to fire him. But also the Browns are mismanaged because their ownership in the Haslams are not good. And
Right.
so even though I think that if you're Stefanski, you don't necessarily deserve to be fired, I think that Stefanski, as a coach, as a play caller, as a dude who's supposed to instill that physicality, that running game on the offensive side of the ball that they did have with Chubb, that they did have with the offensive line, and the offensive line has deteriorated. I just feel like this seems like the end of this chapter for the Cleveland Browns, and it's going to be a mistake to fire him, and they will fire him. It just seems like they're going to go a new direction with a quarterback. I would not guess that they would have Shadur as the incumbent like starter to be for next year. That just
Hmm.
seems like that would be mismanagement, and that seems like it might be something that the owner would do. But the thing is that I just feel like Stefanski, it's kind of run its course, and the quarterback situation is going to change. I don't know that the GM is going to change. Andrew Barry's been there a decent number of years, but it does feel like when you have this situation where you have such a good defense, such a good side of the ball, but your team's just not good, and your quarterback situation's bad and has been bad since 2020 Baker Mayfield, that it just feels like it's time. And it's probably a mistake in the same way that the Steelers firing Mike Tomlin's a mistake in a way, but
Right.
it might just be there. Like it might. So
Yeah. I mean, I think my thought would be like, especially with the way the coaching carousel went last off season.
mhm,
I don't know who you're looking at right now. If you're any of these teams that have fired their head coaches already and are considering firing your head coach, there isn't a Ben Johnson out there. Like
mhm,
there isn't an Aaron Glenn out there right now.
mhm, mhm,
There isn't a Kellen Moore. Like so it's
mhm,
like if you do this, who are you going to get?
mhm,
Who are you going to get? Like I don't know that you can get a better guy than who you have right now.
mhm,
And also, I don't think you've given this guy the best possible opportunity to be successful. Like, Baker Mayfield in 2020 was the best quarterback that he has had, which
mhm,
Baker Mayfield in 2020 was a really, really good quarterback.
mhm,
Um, but what's he supposed to what's he supposed to do when it's not his fault that all of these names are being added to that guy's jersey of
mhm,
Cleveland Brown quarterbacks. Like he's not the reason that's happening. It's
mhm.
because of whatever. Like
Manage.
so I think I think it would be a disservice to your franchise if you fire him. That said, it probably will happen. And, he'll probably go become an amazing offensive coordinator for a team that
Mhm,
needs a new offensive coordinator.
mhm,
And a few years from now, he'll get a head coaching gig again. And you will be
mhm,
very sorry that you did it.
mhm. And this leads just quickly into a take that I was workshopping with you the last 2 weeks that isn't going to be one of my predictions, but is something that I'm pretty damn sure about. That will be that the whole AFC North switches out their head coaches by the end of next year. Not this year, but next year. That I think Tomlin, we talked about, he's on the hot seat. It feels like it's run its course. Stefanski on the hot seat. It feels like it might have ran its course, even though it might be a mistake if they fire him. Zach Taylor, I don't know that people think he's a good coach. I don't know that people think he's a terrible coach, but he's not the solution in Cincinnati, and he's been more of the problem in Cincinnati. But the
Mm-hmm.
thing is, I think Cincinnati will hold off on getting rid of him until next year because they are cheap and his contract goes through next year. So I think he will make it to next year and then he will leave. And then I think that John Harbaugh and the Ravens, it's kind of a similar Tomlin situation where this version of the Ravens hasn't been able to be on that upward trajectory this year. And I can understand the folks who think Harbaugh's not the solution. It's been years. We haven't won the Super Bowl since 2012. We haven't had major playoff success, even though we've had number one seeds and been really good teams the last couple of years. We've underachieved. And I think that if that happens, if Stefanski and Tomlin and Harbaugh all get basically released out into the ether of available coaches, I think that's a bunch of good coaches that I think a bunch of teams should jump on. If you're the
Mm-hmm.
Tennessee Titans or the Dolphins or the Browns or any other team, the Giants, I think that you should jump on any of those three head coaches between Stefanski and Harbaugh and Tomlin. And so I think that we have a good shot here. I've seen a bunch of candidates who are really well-respected veteran candidates here who could be available.
For sure. Absolutely. All right, one more. Pete Carroll. He's the only one that I think, even though the Raiders just made a coaching change last year, he's the only one of the this is their first year head coaches that I could see actually making a difference, or the team's making a change. It just hasn't worked, right? They brought in Pete Carroll, they brought in Geno Smith. It just has not worked. And I would imagine that Tom Brady is not just like, okay, whatever. Well, we'll see what happens next year. Like you have these really, good young offensive stars and Ashton Genty and Brock Bowers. Um, you got to give them something to work with, coaching wise, and I don't think the Raiders have done that, and so it would not surprise me if the Raiders decide to move on from Pete Carroll. Brought him out of retirement for 1 year. It was really bad, and who knows, maybe we're having similar conversations about Pete Carroll the way we have about Russell Wilson, in terms of, hey, if his career had ended when he left Seattle, would he be a Hall of Famer? And now, okay, now what do we see? Because of this.
Right. And I think that, as you're saying, I think he's the most likely one that in his first year here has a shot to get fired. I don't think like the Saints are going to be firing Kellen Moore. I don't know that any of these other first year head coaches are going to be fired here. But I think that Pete Carroll, especially because he's by far the oldest of those new hires, I think
Mm-hmm.
that it seems like to me, he's kind of just the Biden of coaching, where like he's the veteran, you kind of know what you're getting. He's not flashy or impressive. He didn't improve the defense at all when he's supposed to be a defensive guy. But
Yeah.
you pick him because you're worried about the ether of the other things that could happen, the other options you have. But he's just too old, man. Like Pete Carroll's supposed to be an energy, a motivator. And it seems like Pete Carroll, he kind of right now to me kind of falls into the Nick Sirianni of, you show up if you're a Raiders player and you walk in and you see Pete Carroll and you just go, what do you do?
Yeah.
Like, you're not a coordinator, you're not motivating us. They've looked lifeless. You're older. Older is even an understatement. You're ancient. Like it. I understand what the Raiders were trying to do, but it hasn't worked, and I don't think having it go another season would make it work. And
Right.
that's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Pete Carroll coaching the Raiders is like Al Michaels being the play-by-play announcer for Thursday Night Football. Like, it's like, man, we know what you once were, and this just is not it. This is not the same. And that's okay. You know what? Not everyone ever everyone eventually falls off a little bit, and Let's just call it what it is. So,
Mhm.
all
Mhm.
right, predictions. We're running long, but it's okay. That was important. That was good. Hot seat talking. Nick, what is your prediction for this week? It is 2:27 p.m. on 12/2, Tuesday 12/2. What is your prediction?
My prediction, I'll just let it rip here. It's going to be something that I think has a shot this week. I think that Miles Garrett's going to break the sack record this week.
Wow. Okay.
Not break the sack record, break it this week. He needs 4 to break it. He's at 19. You got to get to 23. So you actually need 3.5. Or no, you need 4 to get. Why am I blanking? You need
Four.
to get to 23, so you need 4. I think he can get 4 against Cam Ward and the Titans. I think that the game's going to be close, so it's not like the Titans can just be running the ball with the lead. And so I think that you got a shot here, a Titans team that I think you can get a massive pass rush on. Let's see Miles Garrett if he can tear the Titans apart when he's been able to get these 3, 4, 5 sack kind of games. So let's see if Miles Garrett can do it. I think he's got a really good shot here.
I could see that happening. That adds to your list of predictions so far this year. Number one was the New York Giants lose out. They still have not won yet since you made that prediction. The Detroit Lions will win the NFC North.
Not
After this
looking great.
last week looks a lot tougher, but it's not impossible. It's not impossible. You said that Christian McCaffrey will have the most underrated offensive season of all time.
Mhm.
He's continuing to look good, and now Miles Garrett breaks the sack record this week. All right.
Mhm.
Well, for me, it is Tuesday 12/2 at 2:29 p.m. Eastern Time, and my prediction is that the Denver Broncos will not win a playoff game. I think that the Denver Broncos will be one and done this year. I cannot continue to look at these wins and think that this team has what it takes to win in the playoffs. Um, if they have if the playoffs started right now, they'd be hosting Buffalo. I think Buffalo wins that game. Um, Even if they get the 1 seed, then okay, that's going to make it actually even harder. They'll get the bye, and then they'll have to play. Probably the worst team they would have to play would be like the Chargers, who they've already lost to once at home. So I have no faith in this Broncos team. I I just can't see it, right? Like we look at their last 4 wins. It was a 3-point win against the Texans, against the Davis Mills Texans. It was a 3-point win against the Raiders at home. It was a 3-point win against the Chiefs at home, and it was an overtime victory over the Commanders because the Commanders went for two.
Mhm.
It's not inspiring. It it is
Mhm.
not inspiring at all. And so I think that no matter who the Broncos play, whatever their first game of the playoffs is, I think that Denver will not win that game. They'll be going home after one game.
Mhm. Yeah, I think you got a solid shot there. The thing is the AFC, if you just look at the teams, that I don't know that there are any teams in the AFC that I quote unquote believe in. But the thing is, if there's nobody I believe in, teams still gotta win games. Like if I don't believe in the Broncos and don't believe in the Colts, and the Broncos play the Colts, one of them gets to win in the playoffs. Like
Yeah,
whether I like it or not, if the Broncos match up with the Colts, it's like, well, I think that Bo Nix, you suck, and I think Daniel Jones, you're a fraud. But like one of you gotta win.
right.
Like Trevor Lawrence, Daniel Jones, Bo Nix, Aaron Rodgers slash the depleted version of Lamar Jackson. Like I just think they're a Justin Herbert and this fallen apart team. Like I just think that even if we don't believe in basically everybody, somebody's got to win, and so it's going to look weird this year in the AFC especially.
Yeah, yeah, true, true. So, all right, that adds to my predictions for this year. I have that the Super Bowl will feature a wild card team. I have that KC will not make the playoffs. Kansas City will not make the playoffs. I have that Arizona wins 3 more games this season. They did
Mhm.
not beat Tampa Bay this week, which means if they do it, which I do still think that they can, they will do it against and cause some serious headaches in the NFC West, which I think will be really fun and fascinating. And I have that Denver will not win a playoff game. All right, Nick, give me a game that you're excited about this week.
I am excited about Bengals Bills. I think that my brain just reaches back to the DeMar Hamlin game a couple of years ago. That game was looking like a really good game before that tragedy happened. I think that a relatively healthy Joe Burrow against a healthy Josh Allen with some not good defense being played is going to be a fun game. The Bills obviously aren't in control of their own destiny to win their division, but they still need to be winning these games. They've had a propensity to lose against bad teams like the Dolphins. I think the Bengals just beat what we think is a something team. Like, we don't think the Ravens are terrible. We don't think they're great, but I think the Bengals have a shot there. So I think that could be a really fun game that both teams are getting a little healthier here and has a shot to be a really fun game. So I think Bengals Bills can be a lot of fun here.
I think that'll be a really, really interesting one. Yeah, the Bengals are trying to do what the Bengals always do, which is make things interesting at the end of the season. I know that when we did our preview show, I said that the Bengals will not be making anything interesting at the end of the season. But here we are. They've won a couple of games. Joe Burrow is back. Buffalo looks beatable, and so that'll certainly be an interesting one. My game that I'm really looking forward to is next Monday night, the final game of week 14, and that is Philadelphia versus the Chargers. Um, Philadelphia, we said it a couple weeks ago, and it's seeming more and more like it's happening, and that this Eagles team looks a lot like the 2023 Eagles that started like 10-1 and then lost like seven straight games, including a playoff game. Um, they lose to the Bears. Before that, they lose to the Cowboys. Their two games before that were wins, but 16-9 win over the Lions and a 10-7 win over the Packers, where the offense didn't really look very good. But the thing that they were able to hold their hat on was how good the defense was. Well, in the last two games, the defense has finally given in a little bit. That said, we've got this Chargers team that you've been trying to put in the grave for a few weeks now, but they just won't seem to go, despite having all their losses on the offensive line. And so I think this game will be really, really fascinating because I think it means a lot for both conferences. If the Eagles win this game, then it staves off some of the doubts about them that are circling around them a little longer. Um, and if the Chargers win this game, then it reestablishes them a little bit. For no, well, maybe they can still be competitive in the AFC playoff picture, and vice versa. If the Chargers lose, then we start bringing that Texans discussion into play a little bit more. And if the Eagles lose, then it's like, uh-oh, who's where's the where's the challenge in the NFC? Where are we looking to? And so I just think that'll be really, really interesting. Also, another Eagles loss combined with the Cowboys win this week puts them
Mm-hmm.
only one game apart, which is crazy. Would be a crazy turn of events if that's the case. So that's the game I'm really looking forward to this week.
Yeah, I love that. I think if Dallas is able to chase down Philadelphia, Dallas being as fun as they are and as big of a topic as they are, and Philadelphia collapsing just will be great cinema, man. That would make for a fun end of season. And there are so many competitive divisions. The NFC West, the NFC North, and now the NFC East if you get an Eagles collapse and the Cowboys chasing them down. I think
Hmm.
that those divisions in the NFC South obviously being the weakest in Tampa Bay, still kind of having to wrestle with the Panthers.
Carolina is not far behind them.
Yeah. So I just think that having another division kind of open up to be competitive here down the stretch with a collapse combined with a surge, I think will be awesome. So I'm rooting. I'm rooting for the Cowboys to win and Eagles to lose. I think that will be incredible for us to be talking about and to be watching on Sundays, man.
Yep. Yep, it's gonna get exciting. We're near the crunch time. Things are happening, and
Mhm.
everything means a lot more
Mhm.
than it did, even just two
Mhm.
weeks ago, which is really really fun part of the year. So, all right, everybody. Well, we've gone a little long, but it's okay. This happens more often than not when we do this. Tune in later this week. We've got a big college football show talking about conference championship games, talking a little coaching carousel. And as that has sort of played out a little bit, both micro and macro effects of that, that'll be really, really fun. Thank you all so much for tuning in and watching, and have a great week, everybody.
Sweet.